So let's talk a little bit more about... Ooh, the boss got a fresh cut.
Mm-hmm.
I see that. He's on mono white aggro on the right. Spencer Scogin is on your left with Bat Nexus. And this is a Bat Nexus deck that actually you wrote about in Fact or Fiction for Star City.
Yeah, this was a winner of a recent Make the Championship qualifier online, I believe.
This past Saturday.
My understanding it is the a brainchild of one, Matthew Nass.
A fairly good Magic player.
And instead of trying to do the whole expansion expulsion, get a bunch of mana, and win the game in spectacular fashion, this version of Bat Nexus plays a ton of cantrips and is more focused on sort of making sure that it has Wilderness Reclamation and having enough stuff to do, rather than trying to have one spectacular turn. So the ways that it goes off here, a couple of different ways to win. If you flip over Search for Escanta with Wilderness Reclamation, obviously you can accrue a lot of value that way. A bunch of cantrips, and then you have Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and 4 copies of Depose Deploy, which, on top of many other things, can be used as a win condition once you're taking a bunch of turns in a row.
The boss is going to kick things off with a Healer's Hawk into an Adanto Vanguard. That's where he started this game off. Spencer with a couple of lands and a Search for Escanta. Now, if you know Tom Ross, you know he loves to attack. He's had a lot of success in his career with mono white and mono red strategies. Not looking to splash blue this week, and Azorius aggro has been popular on the SCG Tour. But the boss says, all I want is planes. I don't need these blue mana for Deputy Detention or these counter spells. And now he'll play Banalish Marshal in here for quite a bit of damage as Spencer's going to fall down. It looks to 17 is 4th. Looks like it's going to be 13. However, Revitalize is going to bring him up a little bit and allow him to draw a card.
Yes, I like Ross's build here quite a lot because Tom lives in reality. He knows that you can't reliably cast blue cards off of 8 total dual lands, and so he is playing them on a white build. He has Demystifies in his sideboard, which are supposed to act as a proxy for Spell Pierce and Negate in this matchup in particular, since the deck is built around Search for Escanta and Wilderness Reclamation.
Nexus of Fate's going to go to the graveyard there from Search for Escanta, and it will get shuffled right back into the deck. So a new card will be coming here for Spencer, for his draw step. At 16, the boss is 23. And I'm curious to see the evolution of these white aggressive strategies. We know they are good. We know they have a pedigree. Andrew Ellenbogen winning Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica with a Boros strategy, beating Luis Scott Vargas in the finals, also playing a Boros strategy. Jacob Hagen last weekend alongside Liz Lynn and Ryan Overturf with Azorius aggro. These white decks are powerful, and they are winning in this standard format. Hallowed Fountain enters the battlefield, tapped there for Scogin, and we're going to head back over to Ross.
Yeah, can't really question the pedigree of this strategy. As you mentioned, both the first and second place finishing decks at the last Standard Pro Tour. Whether or not you want to splash, the core base here of these white aggro creatures, I think is going to be a feature of the Standard format for as long as they're legal.
A 4th land here for Ross, and now he'll do some attacking. Looks like it's going to be a copy of Depose, which will tap the Vanguard and allow Spencer to draw a card. And this is the big, and it's weird to call this a big new innovation, but this is a big new innovation for this deck.
Well, it's all cards that work and draw you towards your key cards, specifically Wilderness Reclamation. I think a lot of the list that we saw week 1 and maybe floating around Magic Online had too much infrastructure devoted to, once I have Wilderness Reclamation, my deck's really powerful, and probably not enough in terms of either having a backup plan or enough ways to find Wilderness Reclamation. And this build of Bat Nexus has alleviated some of that by just playing with as many viable cantrips as it can get its hands on.
We saw Revitalize earlier. We see this Depose Deploy now.
4 Opt, 4 Growth Spiral as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really as many good cantrips as you can get your hands on.
And there is an Opt. And you see Ross played a Tithe Taker, and the Opt is going to cost 2. So Spencer's not going to be able to play that. Maybe a little bit of a misstep there, because that could really add up, as Search for Escanta will allow Spencer to keep the top card on his deck. Spencer going to take a look at Tithe Taker. Some relevant text on that 2-1.
Yeah, and if Scogin doesn't have Wilderness Reclamation, his mana is really at a premium too. So you might say, well, it's only 1 mana, but it's a lot.
Now there is Wilderness Reclamation and pass the turn back. Tithe Taker is the powerful human soldier that Ross has on the battlefield. He'll play a Plains. That'll be permanent number 10 for the City's Blessing for old Snubby, the old Snubhorn Sentry. I think Ross has more than enough for a lethal attack here at this stage.
Yeah, we're going to see here if Scogin has one of his copies of Root Snare to survive the turn. With 5 mana, he can Root Snare and Opt through the Tithe Taker.
Now, of course, if you're Tom, you're probably thinking a little bit about Settle the Wreckage, but as we know, these decks, at least at this stage, don't really play that card.
Yeah, 0 copies in this list, and this is a straight port from the Mythic Championship winning list. So, and also, you get in the spot again, Span Nexus, where you have to play around so many different things. I think you have to narrow the game down to one card you're playing around.
There's an Adanto Vanguard.
There's no way you're going to be able to pace this game to be able to beat Fog and Settle the Wreckage at the same game, so you got to choose the one you want to play around.
And now here's the card that Tom actually wrote about this week on SCG Premium. It is Unbreakable Formation, the very, very, very powerful addendum instant. In this instance, we'll be giving Tom Vigilance, +1/+1 to all of his creatures, and his creatures are indestructible at this stage. But that doesn't do anything against Settle the Wreckage if Spencer has it. But again, we know that the deck doesn't play it.
Yep. Way to play around sweepers here, and also in the mirror where creatures are similarly sized, +1/+1 on all your stuff can lead to a major trump in combat.
This will be an opt. Spencer maybe needs to find a Root Snare, and Tom has done a nice job of putting a lot of pressure on Spencer. He'll tap 3 mana, and this will be a copy of the Fog. So Spencer will get to play at least one more turn. The question is, will he get to play another past that, as Search for Escanta will take a look at the top card of the deck. There is a Teferi in hand right now for Spencer.
So the big payoffs from this spot, from Scogin's perspective, are Nexus of Fate and Root Snares. That's all you're looking for here.
Trying to get that snowball rolling, as Breeding Pool is going to enter the battlefield untapped.
Because Tom has no recourse from the spot. All he can do is present lethal every single turn and force Scogin to have something. But it's not that hard for Scogin to keep him off of doing a meaningful game action for the rest of the game.
Here's Teferi. That's going to minus on the Tithe Taker. I do think Spencer is paying too much for his spells.
Yeah, he appears to be overpaying on his own turn. And Tithe Taker only affects doing
Tom's
stuff
turn.
on opposing turns.
Yeah. Well, Wilderness Reclamation is going to allow Spencer to untap all of his lands. Tom has lost his Tithe Taker. And Tom has drawn a card for the turn.
I'm not sure what the point is of interacting with the Tithe Taker here from Scogin's perspective. You know, it doesn't prevent you from casting any sort of fog. And Ross has way past lethal, even down one of his threats. So I suppose we'll see in a moment here. But
yeah, I do think that Tom is the way that he is kind of thinking about the attack is he's probably trying to figure out if there's a way for him to balance around Settle the Wreckage.
Right, because Scogin's play from last time with the Teferi does make some sense if he's trying to settle.
Yeah,
that's the one card that would come to mind. But again, how are you know, Scogin's getting to the point where his Search for Escanta is going to transform. I just don't think you can try to pace this game over the course of several turns.
No, I think I'm with you there. I think trying to walk the tightrope or the balancing act isn't really going to work. This will be a copy of Growth Spiral. I picked up a copy of Depose Deploy. Deploy might be able to buy some time here.
Well, I mean, certainly if Ross does kind of a half-hearted attack.
This split card means that 2 1/1s will enter the battlefield and 2 life will be gained. So this might just be some sort of weird makeshift fog in this instance.
Yeah, I guess I would have preferred for Scogin to allow Tom to go into combat here.
Yep.
Because if Ross makes some sort of half-measure attack trying to play around Settle the Wreckage, then you buy a lot of time with that deploy. If you kind of present everything ahead of time, then you can safely just alpha.
Curious, is there a reason that Tom's creatures are untapped? It looks like he attacked. I don't think they all have that. I don't think they have Vigilance.
Yeah, they get it the previous turn, right?
Yeah.
Or is that not true? It can't. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah.
Right. I was gonna say I don't think that tracking of Vigilance persists. So
that's not a thing. Yeah,
right.
That's a one-turn thing. Now here's a Conclave Tribunal. Decisions. Teferi or Wilderness Reclamation, partner. Or Search for Escanta.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying Scogin's got 2 draw steps to do something. The Search for Escanta, I think, is the most threatening card there.
All right. Oh, going to plus with Teferi.
Because he's in a position to flip. What does all the extra mana matter if he's down to just 2 cards in hand?
Sure.
He can do whatever he's going to do.
Well, Search for Escanta is going to bite the dust from the Conclave Tribunal. A timely draw step there for Tom Ross. Scogin does get to take 2 draw steps, 1 for the turn, 1 for the Teferi. That's an Arc of Oroska. What is this? Another Wilderness Reclamation? All right, so 2 triggers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's the city's blessing.
So maybe he gets 1 look out of the arc.
Yeah. All right, so float 3. Okay, draw. Did he get there? That's just a breeding pool to go along with the Temple Garden in hand. I think.
Well, he still gets one more.
I guess one more crack at it, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Let's do it again. Hi-ya. Opt. Okay. About a redraw. There's also a Teferi trigger that has to occur too, I believe.
Yep.
Still for untapped 2 lands. Opt only cost 1. Okay. Take a look. Don't draw just yet. Scry first, of course. Top card becomes the bottom, and Search for Escanta, I think.
One of the few pure misses in this spot.
And that is going to do it. So, Tom Ross is going to win game number 1 here over Spencer Scogin as mono white aggro, just creatures. All you need is creatures. Going to win game number 1 here over Bant Nexus. Very interesting stuff here. As Tom electing not to go with that blue splash, will that hurt him as we take a look at the sideboards here for both players? We're actually going to start with Spencer and his 4 negates, 3 Hydroid Krasis, 3 Knight of Autumn, 2 Crushing Canopy, 2 Lyra Dawnbringer, and 1 Teferi Hero of Dominaria. As you mentioned, this is the same deck list that Lukish, we believe it's pronounced, on Magic Online, won that MCQ with, so congratulations to that player. Heading to the next Mythic Championship, and looking to have some success here as Spencer with the exact same 75.
So you got a lot of creatures in the sideboard here that are very good against mono red because they are good at gaining life. Hydroid Krasis, Knight of Autumn, and Lyra Dawnbringer. They're less effective here because their body just doesn't line up against how big Ross is able to make his threats. I still think the Lyra is probably above the line here because it's just so dominating on the battlefield. I don't mind the extra copy of Teferi here as well. The Knight of Autumn, I suppose, with Ross having some Conclave Tribunal type of stuff in the deck is probably over the line here. I don't think I would go so far as to play with Hydroid Krasis, though.
Other side of things here for the boss, it's 4 Baffling and 4 of the powerful Honor Guard, much better against, of course, Golgari. Not so great in this matchup. A Johnny Adversary of Tyrants, 3 copies there, 2 copies of Adanto Vanguard, and 2 copies of Demystify, which he's deeming the white Spell Pierce.
I like the Adanto Vanguards and the Demystifies. Obviously, a ton of enchantments that are critical in Skogin's deck. The Adanto Vanguard is a much faster threat than something like the Snubhorn Sentry that requires a lot of time to get online. So I think you have 4 easy cuts there. And, yep, just a slightly faster clock and a little bit of interaction for enchantments, I think, is a good game plan here for Tom.
Tom Ross is going to take a step away from the table here for a moment, perhaps asking a judge a question, which gives us a great time to talk about the Magic the Gathering sale that's happening on StarCityGames.com. It happens every single Monday. Hundreds of new singles on sale through this Monday. See if you can name all 4.
I believe we have a FNM Pendelhaven, a Replenish, a Unhinged Plains.
That is correct.
And a... Let me just, is that a simplified Chinese Tameo?
Tameo what?
I don't, the more recent one from Rise. I don't know. The one that people have. They're in the band Spirit sideboard every once in a blue moon.
It is, I actually had to look it up. It's Tameo Field Researcher.
Yeah, there you go. Field Researcher. I'm not confident on the language though.
Yeah, I'm not either. I couldn't. Could you tell me Tameo Field Researcher's abilities?
I think it's got. You choose 2 creatures, and when they can deal damage to the player for each one through a turn cycle, you draw a card.
Correct.
Feel like it keeps something tapped. There's a minus that keeps things tapped. Is that right?
Minus, tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't tap. And now this is the tough one, the ultimate.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Don't know.
I couldn't remember either. It's a -7, draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with, you may cast non-land cards from your hand without paying their mana cost.
Okay, whatever.
It doesn't come up much.
Just another arbitrary, you mostly win the game. But you kind of already won the game because your Planeswalker was unassailed for 5 turns.
Right. Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Don't think I've ever seen that one go ultimate.
Probably not. I think it's better just to keep plussing, right?
Probably.
Just keep going.
Presumably you have some creatures. in
Right,
your deck,
yeah, you just keep going.
You can also target their creatures, don't forget.
Right.
And if they hit you, you get to draw a couple of cards. Maybe stop your opponent from attacking on occasion.
So I didn't do that bad. I would give...
Honestly, I would give you like a B.
Yeah, that's a
because
B understanding of...
that card didn't see a lot of play, and it's a very obscure design. And it just wasn't something that we saw a lot of. It's like a sideboard card or like a 2-of during a standard format sometimes.
3-color Planeswalkers, just, the deck building cost is really high.
Yeah.
And that one isn't exactly blowing doors down on rate. So didn't see a whole lot of play.
No. Spencer be on the play, Tom be on the draw. It's Bant Nexus versus Mono White Aggro to kick things off here in Dallas. We'll see where Spencer does want to start with this powerful Bant Nexus deck. We are still going through kind of the iterations of this archetype. We know that Wilderness Reclamation is very powerful. It's just about finding the best version. These Bant Nexus Wilderness Reclamation decks have been having much more success online than in real-life tabletop tournaments. But you have to imagine at some point that success is going to translate to a tournament in real life.
Well, I think this list is just a massive step forward.
Yeah.
Just the volume of cantripping, the fact that it's still really powerful once everything gets online. I think that's such an improvement over the other builds that require just so much infrastructure to get anything going. It's not like you need help winning the games where you resolve Wilderness Reclamation and then it's in play for multiple turns. That's not where you need help. You need help in the games where it doesn't happen or where you need to spend a lot of your resources finding it. And I think this build of Bant Nexus is so much better on that front.
Revitalize here from Spencer is going to have him go up to 22. He'll also draw a card, of course, on Tom's end step. Tom kicking things off with a pretty aggressive start. Couple of planes, a Legion's Landing on turn 1, 2 copies of Hunted Witness on turn number 2, which means that Legion's Landing could be transforming on turn number 3. Knight of Autumn is going to join the fray, so it appears as though Spencer has sideboarded in at least one creature. He'll make it into a 4/3, bigger than everything that's going on the battlefield, and pass the turn back. How do you feel about the inclusion of that card after sideboard?
I think because Ross is playing with Conclave Tribunal, it's probably over the line, but it's nowhere near as good here as it is against Mono Red, where even a 2/1 trades with something, and gaining 4 is really impactful. Neither is really the case here. I mean, gaining some life is fine, but we saw in Game 1, when Ross gets his shop set up here, he's going to be able to overwhelm a little bit of life gain here. His deck is set up to do well more than 20 points of damage. And a 2/1 body in the spot where you decide to gain life or blow up an enchantment doesn't really brawl with any of Tom's cards effectively. So it's probably over the line to bring in, but it's a lot worse here than it is against Mono Red.
Tom with a copy of Unbreakable Formation. This card was exquisite for me in the MCQ that we saw this Bant Nexus deck win. There's just so much going on with this card. It is so flexible, giving all of Tom's creatures +1/+1 indestructible, all that good stuff. Also allowing him to get some damage in, transform his Legion's Landing into Adanto, which gives him the mana to play Snubhorn Sentry. It's a really, really nice turn there for the boss.
Yep. There's a cap on how many you can play. You do still need a critical mass of creatures, but looked very good there.
Looks like Spencer may have missed land number 4. Here's another copy of Legion's Landing for the boss, so he's going to make another one of these vampire tokens.
And that should get him to the city's blessing, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Nice thing about Legion's Landing and History of Benalia is those are actually 2 permanents in 1.
Right.
So might be able to take an opponent by surprise there, but when you are counting the city's blessing, you can do a little bit of shortcutting. And remember that is 2 permanents. Conclave Tribunal. Looks like that's going to be played now as well. Use that brand new vampire to take care of this Knight of Autumn. Looking to get a bunch of damage in is the boss. However, a negate is going to counter that. And I believe those at least one negate's coming from the sideboard now too.
That is surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not because Ross doesn't have spells. He's got some. It's just 2 mana is a lot to hold up against a deck that's flooding the battlefield with a bunch of 1-cost permanents. But it wasn't bad there.
Yeah?
I mean, yeah, Scogin got his money. It was really important to counter that. I think Tom can still send in everything here pretty comfortably with the transformed Adanto here, allowing him to sort of replenish his threats.
We're going to see this Knight of Autumn get in front of, looks like the vampire token. No interest in blocking any of these copies of Hunted Witness, and then Snubhorn Sentry and the Knight would trade, so doesn't have any interest in that. Does Spencer as we head back over to him. He's looking for a land. He found a copy of Hinterland Harbor. Let's see if this supercharges the hand. As he's immediately tapping 4 mana, we can call that supercharging the hand. maybe not. Demystify the last card. He called it the White Spell Pierce.
Good morning.
Yeah, it was good there.
Good morning.
Wilderness Reclamation gone.
But you know why it wasn't like Spell Pierce?
Why is that?
He could cast it.
That's true.
He could,
That's true.
He could actually cast
It's
it.
a big difference. Tom going to come in with the Knuckleheads once again. Doesn't really have much of a choice at this stage. Looks like Spencer's going to block 100 Witness. That's going to leave a creature behind. So 3, 4, 5, 6 damage are going to come through. Spencer going to fall down to 5. Tom does have the ability to activate Adanto at the very least, but perhaps he's drawn a spell that he'd like to cast.
And with Scogin unable to cheat on mana and missing land drops, it's going to be hard for him to keep his head above water here.
That Demystify was filthy. Scogin at 5 right now. Boss, well, his life total's pretty high at 26. That one doesn't matter all that much. The follow-up is History of Benalia. So, another token coming on in, 2/2 Vigilance, and now Spencer will draw. He's got some real work to do. Is there another copy of Wilderness Reclamation in hand? Are there some root snares in there? Because now the pressure is on the Bant Nexus player to stay alive. It's going to be lethal every turn.
Right, but, you know, Scogin is not out of this.
No, not at all.
You really need the Wilderness Reclamation because Skogin's so far behind that he's going to need personal Mana Flare to be able to cast everything to keep up here. But if he casts Wilderness Reclamation and has Root Snare, he's through the turn, and then he goes to his next turn with 8, maybe 10 mana if he makes a land drop. You can do a lot with 10 mana.
Well, there's Wilderness Reclamation, and those lands are untapped. History of Benalia, Chapter 2 on the way. So here's another 2/2. Knight with Vigilance. Now we saw Tom thinking about Settle the Wreckage last game. Could be thinking about it again this particular game.
But it's the same story as before. I think trying to thread the needle of being able to beat Fog plus Settle the Wreckage is too hard, and you need to narrow the game down to playing around one thing.
Looks like the boss is done thinking it through, and he says, I'm going to attack with all of my creatures. You better have something good here. There is at least a Revitalize in hand here for Spencer. Here is Revitalize. And gain 3 and draw a card. Didn't get a great look at it. It may have been a copy of Growth Spiral there for Spencer.
I mean, it's Root Snare or Bust. We're going to find out here in a moment.
Is that where we are now? Is it because, let's see.
I guess 2, 4, 5. No, I guess he can just trade off with the Snub Horn.
If you block Snubby, he goes down to 1, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing. Ooh.
Okay.
So this is 3, 4, 5. That's still 7. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so down to 1. Okay. Three, 4. Yep, I got the math right there. Okay. This also leaves Knight of Autumn on the battlefield. I suppose there's some interest in that. Now, of course, when History of Benalia goes off next turn, Chapter 3 is read. Well, then those knights are very large.
Yeah, I mean, it's way past lethal, and now we're moving to the part of the game that's just can Scogin either keep up a bunch of fogs here and power through his deck that way, or do something so good with Nexus of Fate that, you know, by the time Ross gets another turn, if he gets another turn, too much damage has been done.
Another copy of Wilderness Reclamation has been drawn here. And it looks like it's going to be deployed. Okay. So, trigger 1, untap those lands. This is a Revitalize. Up to 4. Draw a card. Lyra's the draw.
And Scogin with Root Snare in hand.
Okay. Untap all these lands. So it looks like he's going to get another turn. And as we have seen in Indianapolis, when we watched Todd Anderson play his take on these Wilderness Reclamation decks, Wilderness Reclamation in multiples, very powerful.
Yep.
Very powerful.
You know, there's still some pressure on Scogin to be able to make his 5th land drop to be able to effectively spend mana on through his first main phase. But as far as instants go, I mean, the world's his oyster at this point. You can cast everything.
As good as that Demystify was, Spencer had multiple copies of the very powerful green enchantment. And now Tom's trying to figure out, is there a way that I can actually get this done? We know, just like you do at home, that Spencer has a copy of Root Snare in hand. I think Tom's the only one that doesn't know that at this stage, but he'll be finding out, I believe, soon enough.
Yeah, I mean, Ross is just doing the due diligence check here of, can I present lethal through Settle the Wreckage, where I still leave some stuff left over, or do I have to attack with everything? It doesn't really matter all that much because I think Scogin's just going to root snare his way through the turn.
There's a Venerated Loxodon.
It's just more of the same here.
It is.
It's more well past lethal next turn. Cards like Revitalize will not keep Scogin's head above water. But I think we were already at that point anyway.
Another Growth Spiral, the draw step. Growth Spiral is where Spencer will start. Draw a card. There's a Hallowed Fountain. That enters the battlefield tapped. Can't play Lyra. Yeah, and there's just nothing else going on there. It looks like another copy of Wilderness Reclamation, Lyra, and a Search for Escanta. So Tom Ross is going to win this match here over Spencer Scogin. 2-0. Mono-white aggro, all creatures all the time with a little bit of interaction there in